want to tell you about a lesson I learned the hard way. Some years ago, I was teaching a college class. I wanted to engage my students in service learning. I wanted them to be inspired to do the work of improving communities, alleviating suffering, and advocating for justice issues in their communities. So I invited one of my heroes to speak to them. His name is Father Greg Boyle. Many of you maybe have heard of him. He's the founder and director of Homeboy Industries, the world's largest gang intervention and rehabilitation program here in Los Angeles, near where I live. His organization works with 10,000 men and women a year as they try to overcome their pasts and reimagine their futures, and they break free of the intergenerational cycles of gang violence. He offers counseling, tattoo removal, job training, legal help. And in the 1980s, when he began Homeboy Industries, his first project was a bakery where he would invite opposing gang members to work with each other, making bread and cookies and all their sweets. How great is that? Eventually, they moved on to Homegirl Cafe, another venture, and Homeboy Silk Screening and an embroidery service. All of these projects to provide healing alternatives, an alternative life to life of violence, and creating safer and healthier communities. So I am a big fan of his work, and I'm a big fan of his spirit and his books. So I invited him to speak to my students, and as he spoke to my students, he described how when he moved into his neighborhood, the situation was pretty much a war zone. Shooting several times a week, violence and death, it was just unreal. And he was amazing. He told amazing stories about how his work and was making a difference and the successes that God was blessing them with. The many lives changed. But then he also told stories of disappointment and grief, people who rejected his appeal of peace and reconciliation. He told us stories of death and dying, and during one painful season, he was burying people every single week, officiating funerals on a weekly basis for people that he knew in his community. He explained the systemic injustice, described poverty that is near impossible to escape, addiction cycles that last for generations, and the cycles of violence that are just so difficult to get out of. And honestly, none of that was really inspiring. It was kind of a bummer. But that's how he chose to end his talk. So after his presentation, I, the host, I opened with a Q&A time, and I opened this Q&A time with this question. So, given everything you just told us, how successful is your program really? Now, give us some numbers. Now, I thought it was a reasonable question. I'm pretty sure many of you watching this right now are thinking, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable question, maybe. Maybe some of you not, because you already know where this is going. See, he had clearly been asked this question before, so he was prepared. He said his answer to me, pointing his finger with an expression meant to communicate to me that the answer should have been obvious. He said, I'm 100% successful. But because we live in a culture of assessment and efficiency and productivity, my first thought was, no, you're certainly not 100% successful. There's something wrong with how you're measuring things. You got to do some better surveying for feedback. Father Greg, if that's your answer, your organization needs a better analytics team, a statistician, an effectiveness officer. I got some suggestions. Or you, sir, you need a reality pill. I didn't say all those things, but that's what I thought. Because what I didn't get is that he was working from a completely different set of metrics. He was measuring his life according to a way higher standard. God had called him to a task that was so hard that our human way of measuring this kind of progress was never going to be the work and the way he was going to measure his work. Setbacks, those people who take big worthy causes up, they don't give up when they face setbacks. And I'm thinking of all the big movements that have taken place in our society, the people who have challenged discrimination, be it race or gender or age or religion or disability or sexual orientation. And that's just a short list. Anyone who takes these big movements up, how difficult it was, how difficult it is, and will always be to challenge systems that oppress and abuse and cause pain. Like Father Greg, if you learn about these people, you see that through ups and downs, they keep their single focus. Setbacks are where these champions of a cause are created and they're defined. Oh, but I wanted to know the stats from Father Greg. And here's the hard lesson I told you I learned that day. And the hard lesson is, don't challenge your esteemed guest lecturer. They will teach you a lesson in front of your students. He schooled me that day. These are the actual words that came out of my mouth. No, I know you're going to cringe. I said, no, you aren't 100% successful. You just told us about all the failures. You just told us lots of people leave. They continue their violent cycles and lifestyles, and you described a lot of death. So you're not 100% successful. How successful are you? And I will never forget his response. He said, I am 100% successful because I am 100% faithful to what God has called me to do. Isn't that great? I quickly learned that he was quoting Mother Teresa, who's probably asked that question a lot also. Mother Teresa, in her work in Calcutta, another leader who had a single focus and would not let setbacks distract or discourage her from the mission that God had called her to do. And that is the picture of perseverance, of character, of a hopeful, vital optimism that inspires me every day, and I hope it inspires you. See, I think it's an acknowledgement that there's a spiritual measure which ultimately is all that matters. God is the one measuring us in everything, in parenting, in relationships, in work. 100% successful because I am 100% faithful to what God has called me to do. Wouldn't you love to be able to say that about everything that we're called to do? Jesus put it this way: what good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? What good is it if you've checked all the success boxes and you gain the world, but it came at the greatest of all costs, your soul? What have you gained? But if you followed your calling every day, the mission God has given you, you will gain your soul. One author puts it this way: you will gain the real you. So, what is God calling you to? In what areas of your life are you facing setbacks that make you feel today like you are failing? In what ways have you measured success only on terms that have nothing to do with your calling? In what ways are you measuring the way you are with your family, your relationships, and your community against a standard that has nothing to do with what God has called us to do? My prayer for you today is this: may you find your greatest joy, fulfillment, satisfaction, your greatest sense of achievement and accomplishment directly related to how faithful you are to your calling. And may you always know that you are 100% successful.